through the hot red tides of sin.
This is Faith Blind
Council.
Everything is within.
You create the light.
We are one.
That's it.
Oh, God. Fuck, this is an episode of the show that we're doing. I still haven't come up with, like, an intro thing, like, at all. Of just, like, hey.
No, we have that intro clip.
That's all we need. We could at least start saying our names, I guess. We do that some episodes. I don't know. I got a name. It's Frauda Dreadnought. That's me.
Yeah, Yara Marud.
Awesome. That's us. We're here. We're the Faith Blind Council. Look at that. He nailed it. 5 out of 7 intro.
Fucking consistency.
Perfect. Right on the button. Not too much. Not, like, overly contrived. I think really we're hitting our stride here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our
doing
episode
well
for this month is about folk magic, specifically in the American Appalachia.
Yeah, Appalachia, which even the pronunciation of that word, like the people from Appalachia pronounce it Appalachia. Anywhere else is like, it's Appalachia. There's an I in there. No, fuck
well,
you,
it's
it's
kind of
Appalachia.
like how anybody who's not from Upland pronounces it Upland, but if you pronounce it like Upland and Upland, they get really mad and tell you it's Upland.
Yeah, or like when I lived in Wisconsin, they had New Berlin. You pronounce it Berlin. It is not Berlin. It's
That's
Berlin.
dumb. The point here is that pronunciation is stupid and you shouldn't pay attention to it. So here we are doing this episode, and I really think this is a good, a kind of a good afterthought, really, for the last episode we did about non-paradigmal magic. There was a conversation on the Facebook group that kind of sparked a thought in me, where we talked about in the last episode non-paradigmal magic really existing without a god form, and I think that that's kind of a very narrow, like, limiting perspective on what non-paradigmal magic is. And the way that I would kind of curtail that on is that non-paradigmal magic is something that works independent of a specific worldview, right? In that way, like, folk magic inherently does that.
Yeah, very true. In that discussion that we kind of had, like, I had pointed out, like, with our definitions and everything of non-paradigmal, it basically fell within, because as I had described a paradigm, it's not, like, it typically falls within the concept of, like, a religion, but it's not just that. It could be a worldview or something that is traditionally structured, or even going so far as something that has already been committed to the concept of an egregore or thought form. So it's entered, like, kind of the collective unconscious. So that's where you get, like, pop magic and shit like that, where it's already entered the cultural milieu, as opposed to with non-paradigmal, it's like, no, I'm just making this now on myself. Nobody else knows what it is.
All right. I think that's probably a better way to look at it. Or at least a more broad way to look at it without, like...
Yeah, and so with that, you have, like, I would still consider what we're talking about with today with the Appalachian folk magic, it would still be a paradigm because it is based in a traditional system.
That's fair. I think where I would kind of draw the distinction on it is that a lot of folk magic is stuff that is so ubiquitous and so, like, day to day within the community that it's in, which, Yara, where I would say that's probably where you would draw the line of a paradigm, right? Because it still exists in that community's worldview, right? But within that worldview, the practice of folk magic is so ubiquitous and it's so pervasive that it exists without any other attachment to what that community might believe.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. However, like, I would still hold with mine, because with the whole traditional aspect, you still, even within that community, you have rights and wrongs. You have structure. You have things that you are told to do, things that you are told not to do. So, as opposed to, like, with the non-paradigmal thing, it's whatever the fuck you want it to be. Like, you are the one who decides what is and isn't effective, as opposed to, like, we'll discuss with this, there are things that you have to do in order to achieve certain results.
Yeah, that's fair. Cologne, did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, as far as whether Appalachian folk magic is non-paradigmal, what Yara is saying about there being relatively strict rules about, I mean, just certain rituals and, I mean, dare I say superstitions and stuff, it's clearly very formed. You know, I wouldn't consider it non-paradigmal either.
I mean, if you read through any, like, manuscript, you see a lot of, like, okay, you use this herb and this whatever and this blah blah blah. But, like, any practitioner that you talk to of any kind of folk magic is going to tell you use what you have available. And to a certain extent, that becomes, winging it sounds really flippant, like, in terms of how to say what you're doing, but that's kind of what you're doing. You're using the things that are at your disposal, and you're using, like, the knowledge that you have in your head, right?
Yeah, and well, the formation of this folk magic it stems from a sort of a necessity, you know, and so it's stemming from, you know, the Indian traditions and the Irish Scottish traditions coming in and stuff, but there's this necessity to having created because of the lack of resources they had, or other, you know, other means of sometimes dealing with these troubles they're trying to deal with, whether it's health or situational and whatnot.
Yeah, and that's fair. One thing that I would say, like, and now we're starting to get into the whole concept of, like, what are things that start to define Appalachian folk magic. Part of the reason I go with yes, it has to be structured, is traditionally you have, not everyone practices, but everyone can use it. And so, like, within Appalachian communities, particularly, like, historically, you have people who do certain things. So you have, like, water witchers. Those are the people who will help you, like, through dowsing techniques, will help you find where water flows underground in order to find a well. Nobody does dowsing except for the water witchers, because they're the ones who are practiced in it, and they're the one who does it. Yeah, you may use the magic, but you do it through them. You call upon them to do it. And the same goes with, like, what we would term now faith healers, but they would call, like, you know, power doctors or doctors.
Or powwowers.
Yeah. They were the ones you went to. Sure, you would use magic, but it was based off of their advice, what they told you, and it was given to them. They were the ones who did it. It was a very kind of structured thing. It was kind of like, magic was really kind of a profession.
Well, yeah, but that was also, like, A, a sign of the times, and B, that is, in and of itself, just the fact that anybody could use it, that doesn't, I don't think that, like, I distinguish the fact that anybody could use it, but they chose not to. That is the paradigm. That is the, like, community standard, I guess. There's no hard rule saying that people couldn't do it. And, like...
Oh, no.
There was no hard rule saying that people couldn't do it, and it was more of just kind of that was the community guideline, I guess. Like, I kind of really talked that in a circle there, but, like, my point being that is the paradigm, right? It's not the technique itself, it's how the technique is applied.
Right, but, I mean, even then, they very much fall hand in hand, because, like, how the technique is structured versus how it's used is, so going back, okay, so a lot of the information that I had personally gotten from this were from a few books. So there's the Foxfire series, which is a phenomenal fucking series, and I highly suggest getting it. There's also Long Lost Friend is another fantastic one, and most recently, Backwoods Witchcraft by Jake Richards. But with Appalachian tradition, not only is it just like how you use it or whatever, or like who's using it, but it's tradition that is passed down. So, you would use a particular water witcher because not only is he good at it, like, yeah, he's great at finding wells, but his father was good at it, and his grandfather was good at it, and they taught it down the line. And by teaching it down the line in such a way, like, those specific techniques were repeated.
Yeah.
And there was very little wiggle room. Like, you did it this way because you were taught to do it this way. You didn't really do it any way else.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to the technique itself. That just applies to how it was passed down. Like, that applies to, like, looking at it. So the only text that I'm really familiar with on this, out of the list that you gave, like, I did a cursory reading over the Foxfire series because I just got it, like, a week, not even a week ago, a couple days ago. But, like, the Long Lost Friend, the edition of Long Lost Friend that I have, the first section of the book is dedicated to, like, this anthropologic breakdown of the history of Appalachian folk magic. And at a certain point, you're coming at it from that standpoint, yes. But when you get into just the technique, it doesn't apply to that, other than that it was written down by a bunch of people who it's been passed down and passed down and passed down from. But there's still a hard line where eventually somebody just did it. And the difference between what makes something paradigmal and what makes something non-paradigmal is what point on the timeline are we at?
Yeah, that's fair.
But that's just me. And it, again, just to kind of reiterate, like, this is all something that, like, is a scale. It's a gradient. It's not black or white.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
But it was an interesting conversation that came up on the Facebook group that I wanted to kind of bring up before we really delved into Appalachian folk magic. And let's do that part now, because it's going to be more fun.
Yeah! So, like I had said, or like a couple things that I had said, the dowsing was a very popular one that's still even done to this day. A lot of people within the Appalachian community have pointed out, and I've spoken to a couple people, and the woman we will actually be interviewing has talked about this, that Appalachian folk magic is a dying art. People don't do it so much because of urban sprawl.
Yeah.
Where it comes from is it's a mixture of basically three different traditions. You have the immigration of the Scots-Irish to the Appalachian region, primarily like West Virginia, northern Georgia, and like southern Pennsylvania, that kind of area. Kentucky, Tennessee. That's where Scots-Irish came in, and they brought their beliefs from the Celtic cultures. And in doing so, they mixed that with the indigenous cultures, which were primarily like the Cherokee, came from that region. And then a lot of these traditions, or as far as folk magic goes, that's been written down, at least anyway, when these immigrations came in from the Scots-Irish, these were very heavily slave states. So a lot of tradition also came from African traditional religion as well. from the slaves in that time period that had brought what they had from their homeland, and it all kind of mixed together in this beautiful amalgamation of weird mountain hillbilly magic.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that really is something that a lot of people have a hard time grasping, talking about things existing in gradient, right? Appalachian folk magic and, like, Louisiana hoodoo. It's hard to find a hard, like, separation, right? Not with voodoo, like the religion of voodoo, but the practice of hoodoo, or like American conjure in the South, right?
Or root work is another kind of term for it.
Yeah, they all kind of they describe this same kind of conglomerate of practice. There's no real, like, hard line of this is only here and this is the difference is like the stuff that you use because it's stuff that's locally available,
right? And they and a lot because I you know this Dreadnought, I had done a lot of work for like 2 years just in the voodoo paradigm, and a lot of those practices in study of Appalachian folk magic just bled into it. There were the same, like, extremely similar techniques and, like, the same kind of thing.
Well, yeah, you see a lot of similarities, maybe not necessarily in the, like, the stuff that's used, but, like, both of them rely heavily on things being done in cycles. They rely heavily on repetition. They rely heavily on, like, prayers and petitions being said the right amount of times at the right times.
Yeah, and one, or like, the first one that comes to mind, speaking of prayers, that was prevalent in both, like, voodoo, hoodoo, as well as Appalachian folk magic, is the concept of using the Bible as a spellbook.
Yes, that is a very, like, that's something that's incredibly prevalent in American folk magic in general. And, you know, historically, you can talk about the fact that, like, Christianity is an inherently oppressive religious system. And so if you are practicing something that exists outside of that, you have to kind of hide it a little bit. And so you start to syncretize things with the Bible. But there's also the belief, if you look back at, like, Gnostic beliefs, like, you can pull anything out of there and apply it to what it is you're trying to do, and you'll find shit in the Bible that works.
Yeah, and, like, because you've read Long Lost Friend a bit more recently than I have, but I know within voodoo, one thing that was extremely common, and in my study with backwoods witchcraft and foxfire, one thing that was common was using, like, the Psalms specifically as prayers, or as spells.
Yes.
So you use a specific, like, each psalm represents, like, a different outcome, and you would kind of say that as a prayer incantation towards things.
Yeah, you basically, so I've done, like, before I started doing, and I still work it into my practice, you know, even today, what you do is you basically use the Psalms as affirmations. And you take those psalms and you repeat them, and you basically use it the same way you would use a calling formula for an invocation. You read the psalm 7 times over a candle that's lit in order to affirm your petition for healing or divination or whatever it is. There's a fucking lot of psalms. Like, there's a lot of them. You can find pretty much.
There's like 100 and some change.
There's a fucking lot, man. There's just so many. But there's so, like, one of the things I've used, you know, several times from doing just work in any kind of, like, kind of hoodoo or folk magic. There's a 7-day healing ritual that I use where basically it calls for you use hospital dirt, you use riverbed dirt, you use a picture or name paper for the person, the intended person that needs to be healed. You light a candle like you put the picture down on a plate, you put dirt over the picture so that it's completely covered, you put a candle in front or on top of the dirt, light the candle, you say it's Psalm 107 verses 14 to 23, I think. I might have, like...
Sure, fuck it, numbers.
Something like that. But there's a specific verse of a specific psalm that you read 7 times, and then you let the candle burn out, and you do that 7 days in a row, and on the 7th day, like, that's when the ritual is complete, and it will start to take effect.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember reading in Backwoods Witchcraft, one of the separations between hoodoo or voodoo and Appalachian folk magic is Appalachian folk magic was primarily Protestant. Mostly Baptist or sometimes Presbyterian. But mostly like Southern Baptist was the predominant religion. And so they didn't really do saints. You don't do saints.
Yeah, no, that like saints are very, very specific to voodoo. Like hoodoo as an extension of voodoo. If hoodoo is the practice of the religion, it extends into hoodoo. But like Catholicism was something that was very, very specific to the syncretization of saints within voodoo as a religion. That's something that didn't necessarily extend out to folk magic at large in America. Because America, outside of that, like, you know, what was brought over by the slave trade, America was largely Protestant. Like, in general. Once you got outside of, like, 2 weird New England cities.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that was in Backwoods Witchcraft that I really appreciated, he was talking about because it talks about his modern practice, and it talks about what he had learned from his mother and his family and stuff like that. The kind of the absorption of the culture around you in your practice. He had mentioned even though they didn't do saints, like hardly ever. With the current state of America, like people, if you go to any like dollar store, you have like the fucking votive candles and shit.
Yeah.
So even though they don't do saints, they've started incorporating saints like Saint Jude or Our Mother of Guadalupe.
Yeah, because you use what's available. Like,
right.
It's a very...
He said that his mother was like a big fan of Our Mother of Guadalupe, and like even though all of the old things that he had learned from his grandmother didn't really touch that kind of thing, but now they've like, oh, well, we've got fucking St. Jude on these candles, what can we do with it?
Yeah, it's nebulous. That's the word I was looking for, like, 5 minutes ago. Nebulous. It's a very nebulous system that will just kind of draw in the stuff that works around it. I believe it was Chaz Moorhead in our interview with him that had brought up the fact that, like, there were people practicing chaos magic before chaos magic had a name.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's a lot of what folk magic has its roots, or chaos magic has a lot of roots in folk magic, because the mentality of a folk magic practitioner is very practical. It's very like, what do I have available that I can use for this stuff?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because going through everything, all of the books, almost every single one just mentions what you can do for what. It doesn't mention, like daily meditations. It doesn't mention, like this is how every day you need to like sit down for a while and just focus on your ancestors or whatever. No. Like the only really daily practice as far as that they do in Appalachian folk magic, there is Ancestor Veneration, but it's more of a kind of like, sort of an altar, I guess. You kind of, because houses and whatever were passed down. Everything was passed down. Like, this is poor people magic. Everything was passed down. The house was passed down from one generation to the next. Multiple generations lived together. And so, like, Ancestor Veneration was, you might have a picture of your grandmother on the wall. Your Ancestor Veneration is going past that picture and remembering her.
Yeah, and it's a thing where I think you don't see a lot of the theory, let's say, of folk magic, because the theory is implied within the books because it was something that was so prevalent in day-to-day life.
Yeah, and as you had said, like, it's very much it's a practical thing. Like, this, all of these books, every single one just assumes that with this practice you have the same culture, where what you, like, everything's passed down, and you live with what you have. So a lot of the spells or incantations or what have you, it's all very practical. Like, there are big sections on how to plant plants at a certain time in order to produce a better yield. There's, like, what are things you should do at certain times. Like, if someone has cut themselves, this is the little prayer you say in order to stop it.
Yeah, and it's very, like, it's like a fucking recipe book. At least, like, Long Lost Friend, the other one that comes to mind that is not Appalachian folk magic at all is Sticks, Stones, Roots, and Bones. And they both read, like, Sticks, Stones, Roots, and Bones has more stuff in it about kind of the theory and the groundwork. But when you look at the spells that are in both books, or the remedies that are in both books, they look like fucking recipes.
That's it! That's fucking exactly it. Every single one reads like a recipe, because, like, all of this shit was just so much ingrained in the culture that it's just like, this is what you have to do. And this is what was passed down by, my grandfather. My grandfather taught me how to do this. And, like, the Foxfire books. So, if you're not familiar with the Foxfire books, it was put out, I think, in the 70s. I forget what university it was, I think, and I could be entirely wrong about this, but this is how I remember it. People went throughout Appalachia and basically just interviewed people. It was an ethnography, essentially. And they just, all of these students and professors just went to these mountain people and asked them, how do you do this? And so, it's a 14-volume book, or volume series, where it's just recipes. Like, this is how we make soap in the mountains. This is how we keep bees. This is how we, make axes. All of this shit. And that's all it was. And, like, one of the, in early America, one of the more prevalent books that almost everyone fucking had was essentially a magical spell book, was the fucking Farmer's Almanac.
Yes. So one thing that I have in my head that I want to say before it kind of the thought escapes me is, like, the similarity, to draw out the analogy of them being written like recipes. When you read a recipe book, the recipe book assumes that you have a basic knowledge of how to cook.
Yeah.
So these American grimoires, we'll call them, they assume a base knowledge of how to do magic. And now you're just looking at technique. And I think that's the missing piece that we were having kind of that dissonance earlier about, where, like, well, it's paradigmal because of this, but it's non-paradigmal because of this, is because the knowledge of how to do magic in general is just something that's missing from those books, because that's the part that's just passed down. Like, that's the part that, like, the what herbs are good for what hours are good for what, the times for things, that part is passed down from generation to generation to generation, but the parts that were, like, important are written down so that you don't forget them.
Yeah. And there's one thing that I will say that part of the reason why I'm like also sticking with the whole paradigmal thing is that there is very much a mythology or a something that isn't really written down that exists within Appalachian folk magic. So you have that it's constantly referenced, and there's a newer podcast that's out that I really recommend just because I'm a big horror fan. It's called The Old Gods of Appalachia, and it's just like horror stories about like creepy old backwoods people. And one thing that they talk about a lot there, and it's mentioned in a lot of books, is the concept of haints, which Haints, a haint. And that's part of the mythology, and what a haint is basically, it's any spirit that could fuck with you. There's very much a spirit aspect. It could be a ghost, it could be a demon, it could be an angel. It doesn't fucking matter, it's a haint. And haints fuck with you. Haints always fuck with you, and there are ways to protect yourself against haints.
So they're basically like fairies.
Yes, and that's part of the thing that like stems from the Scots-Irish. And
yes.
like the whole concept of fairies, and you would leave things for the haints or the fairies, and that also comes from there are some aspects that come from the Cherokee, and in backwoods witchcraft, I really like this one story that he told. There was kind of the idea of a sort of fairy-ish creature amongst the Cherokee, because with Fae, they just don't kind of understand the morality of humans, and so they're just like fuck with you because it's fun.
Yeah.
But with the Cherokee, their story was basically, I forget what he was called. I think it was like Suche or some shit like that. I'm probably doing it or saying it wrong, but it's basically the spirit of this little boy who, when his mother was like, okay, well, you need to fucking come back home, or if you don't come back home, I'm going to come out there and beat your ass. And the boy just stayed out there forever. And he just never came back and became this thing that haunted the woods. And so, yeah, amongst the Cherokee, there's just this little boy spirit who, like, if you were out hunting and you lost your arrows, it was that little boy. And he fucking stole your arrows. And the best way to get him to bring your shit back was to tell him if he didn't bring it back, you would beat his ass.
That's
and that
very,
same kind... Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just great. That's just a fucking great story.
Right.
Man.
And that whole kind of concept, just, it carried over with the immigrants from, like, Scotland and Ireland. And it's like, because there was a synchronization there between this little devilish spirit of this boy who just steals shit and you're gonna beat his ass versus the fairies or the fae, and just they like fucking with you. Like, it's a very similar concept, and so they just kind of bled together into a haint.
Yeah. And that's a lot of, like, it's very indicative of American culture at the time at large, right? You blended all of this shit together and you just made it work.
Right, and so, like, there's all of that shit with the haints, other mythology kind of things. There are, like larger spirits within, that they would give veneration to, and, I remember that the woman we're going to interview, Jennifer, she had mentioned that one of the, like, Appalachian spirits that she gives veneration to is, Spider Grandmother. And, like, there are these spirits that exist within the woods.
Okay.
And, like, Spider Grandmother creeps me the fuck out.
So hold on. Because this is very ambiguously worded. Is it a grandmother of spiders? Is it a grandmother made out of spiders? Or is it your grandmother but a spider?
I I don't know.
My understanding, it's more like just a woman who weaves. I think she's generally portrayed as a feminine woman character. And she's weaved the world, and thus, like, spiders and spider webs are particularly important to her. She's a weaver.
They just looked at her and they were just like, "Yep, she weaves. That's a spider."
See, I would rather prefer Cologne's, interpretation of that than the first thing that comes to my mind, which is this just colossal fucking old spider that lives in the woods.
But it would make you cookies and ask you if you were hungry and try to give you a giant fly.
I don't want these creepy spider cookies.
You would you would have the best woven quilts. Do you weave quilts? No, you don't weave quilts. You weave other stuff. You would have a bunch of really dope hand-knit hats.
Oh, good.
That were knit with 8 hands.
Fucking spiderweb hat. I hate just walking through like a basement or whatever, and just these creepy spider webs that just, what the fuck was that? You just flip out. Most people flip out. It's like, what the fuck was that? Don't touch me.
Well, now it's a hat. And
now
listen,
it's a hat.
I don't want to get personal, but you and I, Yara, are both in a position, given our hairlines, that we really need to start considering our hat options. So, Spider Grandma hat seems pretty dope.
Alright, well, I guess I'm just gonna go out into the woods and cover my head with dead flies and hope that Spider Grandmother likes my shit and weaves me a nice beanie.
Yes. See? You lean into it.
I still don't like it. I don't want to fucking hug my grandma and she's all like bristly haired and 8-legged.
Yeah, but it would be a much stronger hug.
Yeah, more legs, arms to hug you with.
Yeah, good. Yeah, let's just bring it back to fucking Red Riding Hood. No, Grandma, why do you have so many legs? To hug you with!
Yeah, it's perfectly fine, right? Grandma, why do you have 8 eyes?
To see you better with.
It's perfect. It's great. It's totally... Grandma, why are your legs all hairy? Because she stopped shaving. Like, that's really where that's
at some point, you just don't care anymore.
Yeah, you don't need to be a spider for that. Yeah, you don't need to be a spider for that. You just need to understand that the need for you to shave your legs as a woman is baked in there by the goddamn Bic companies that sell you disposable razors. It's a hoax. It's a sham.
Yeah, Spider Grandmother says fuck the patriarchy.
Yes. Yes. Wrapped it all up like a web from Spider Grandmother.
God damn it.
Nailed it. Nailed it. Fuck, man. All right, let's get into so a little more about like Appalachian folk magic specifically before we get into the interview. I think that a lot of what gets kind of lost in translation, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? You have this idea that within folk magic, there are all of these very strict rules, right? Because again, what you're getting is a recipe book. And you're seeing a lot of, like, things that got passed down, and it worked because, my father taught me to do it this way, and it worked for him, and it's worked for me. He wrote it down because his father taught him to do it this way. And a lot of times what you're missing in that is kind of like the art of it, where there is a lot of room for, like, maneuvering and a lot of, like, using what's available and being able to kind of navigate that space, because so much of that space is implied that a lot of people looking at it from an outside perspective look at it very much the way that you would look at ceremonial magic. And ceremonial magic is very thee and thou, and you have to do it at this time and this many times, and you can't fuck up the incantation, you can't do any of this. And a lot of what people like that's lost now we're talking about magical history in general. Folk magic is derived from low magic, which low magic was this thing that everybody did, and it was like, fuck it, do the thing that works, right? So I feel like, and I could be entirely off base on this, but I feel like when it comes to folk magic and you know, the practitioners of many different variations of folk magic that I've talked to have kind of more or less confirmed that, like, you do the fucking thing that works. What's more important than the how is the result. That's what's important. Did the fucking thing work? Did it work if you used rue instead of sage because rue is more indigenous to where you live? Then use rue, you know?
Well, and this, there are two things that I'd like to say based on, what you'd said. First of all, like, the difference between high magic and low magic, as far as I'm concerned, that's just classist bullshit. So
hell yeah,
it is. It absolutely is, and it was, and it's something that has now been dressed up and, you know, passed off. And those are terms that are so fucking esoteric at this point that nobody really uses them.
Yeah,
you
like,
know?
Low magic is what fucking poor people did so that their crops grew, so that they wouldn't fucking die during the winter. While on the other hand, you have high magic, which is a bunch of 19th century rich fucks who didn't have anything better to do except cocaine and doing dress up with their friends.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what you got. Like, you had the difference was, like, you know, the folk magic that didn't get written down for God knows how fucking long. And then you had, like, fucking the sacred work of a Bremlin or whatever the goddamn who has 18 months to set aside to just sit in a room and think about shit? Nobody. Fucking nobody.
Crowley didn't, the goddamn failure, and he was a rich piece of shit. He could have done it.
Yeah, he was rich, and then he heroined and fucked his way into poverty.
Hashtag goals.
And I don't blame him.
Yeah, and then that's when he gets into the low magic with all of the poor people in the fucking poorhouse, hoping that the goddamn crops grow.
Yeah, you know?
But then...
And that... Go ahead.
No, the other thing that I wanted to bring up was, how you had mentioned, like, the whole kind of substitution thing. One thing, and with another thing that you had said that was, implied, was just, like, you had a basal understanding of how shit worked. Another thing that was inherently important was knowledge of where you fucking were. Like, knowledge of the land. Knowledge, like, you didn't really need substitutions because you all knew what plants grew there. You could go out into the woods like, oh yeah, I need monk's hood, or like, I need foxglove. That's right there. That's what it looks like. I know what that is. Like, it was because your entire life was bound to the land. It's very much like, if I don't get this shit and do what I can, like, with what's given to me, like, nothing's going to work. I have to know what's there.
Yeah, but there's also, like, there's a certain level of translation with that, right? Like, and that is something that was developed way back when you know, the Scots-Irish and were first settling, right? And they were, like, it's gonna sound like a really privileged take for me to say that their cultures were meshing, because realistically what it was like just white people showing up and being like, we live here now. Like, but that happening, that's where a lot of stuff happening, because, like, there's shit that grows in, you know, Europe's a real big town or whatever, but there's stuff that grows there that doesn't grow here, you know?
Yeah.
You don't get, like, that's the part that where, like, that translation comes in, because there's a certain amount of, like, you use what's available to you, and that spreads out to, like, if you read, you know, something from an American conjurer grimoire that talks about how to do a protection spell or make, like, a protection bag or something like that, right? Versus something in Appalachian folk magic that has more or less the same, it's the same goal, right? You're making a protection spell. They're going to use different components because different things are locally available.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, within the Foxfire book, they mention specific fucking species, but Appalachia is enormous. It stretches all the way from Georgia to Maine. And this is like 2,000 miles of mountains. And there are different climates. Yeah, it's mountainous, but like the sourwood tree, which grows primarily in the south, and from my reading has the best goddamn honey you've ever tasted if a bee gets the nectar from the sourwood tree. But as opposed to like further north, you'll have trees like the pawpaw, which didn't show up down south and like is also known as like the Hoosier banana or the Ozark banana or some shit like that didn't grow south. You used with what you had, but like you had said, it's the knowledge of what you were doing was inherent. It wasn't so much that, you know, they were substituting whatever, or at least not consciously that they were substituting whatever. It just like, it was there that like we knew what it was, and a lot of it came from the Cherokee as well.
Yes. And I guess that's where like, okay, it's not substitution necessarily on an individual level, or even an individual community level, right? You're getting the substitution coming in on an anthropological level.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at the practice of Appalachian folk magic versus what it came from, you know, Scots-Irish folk magic.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to see, like, you know, things getting substituted, things changing and evolving over time.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about, like, a span of months or years or even decades. Things evolving over a span of centuries, like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Things are changing.
Like, it's one, like, kind of brief substitution sort of thing, I guess, that's very similar to what you're talking about. It also has to do with, like, the synchronization of the two cultures. So, it's nowadays the concept of Stump Water. Or also known as spunk water, which I don't like that one.
Gross. That doesn't seem like something that I'd want to use.
No, and it even mentioned in Backwoods Witchcraft, they're like, yeah, it's called spunk water because it smells funny. Ugh.
Well. Okay.
So stump water, in Ireland and Scotland, they had the same kind of concept. And what this was in Scotland and Ireland, it was water collected from, like, the grooves of a boulder or something like that. So, basically rainwater that had never touched the ground. So it was kind of like it inherently still held, like, whatever connotations it still has with the sky. Well, in Ireland and Scotland, there aren't so many forests as there are in goddamn Appalachia, and so that translated over to stump water, where the rainwater was collected into a stump. And the Cherokee had the same concept. And so when the Scots-Irish came over, they're like, well, there aren't any weird boulders, there's just fucking trees everywhere. Same concept. It was a kind of a substitution, but it's the same fucking principle.
Pretty bold of them to assume that my spunk never hit the ground.
Fucking champion. Just shoot it up in the trees.
Just ejaculating into affinity. That's what I want to leave everybody with here. You know.
And we're gonna leave you with that.
God.
Let's wrap it up. Just jacking off into infinity.
There it is. All right. That we're just going to take a hard left into this interview now.
Oh.
Jesus Christ. Let's get a much more cultured take on Appalachian folk magic.
Yeah.
Yara, do the intro for this. I can't compose myself right now.
All right. So, the person who we are interviewing, she currently has a YouTube channel. It's called The Inner Beauty Guru. You can find her on YouTube. However, like I had come across her online because she'd been posting her YouTube videos, and she practices Appalachian folk magic, but she refers to it as granny magic, which is another term that I really love. Just the concept of, just this is what your grandmother did. This is the kind of fucking magic that grandma did.
I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, she's the inner beauty guru, and she has a heavy focus on Appalachian folk magic and culture. She says she's also a writer, musician, and proud hillbilly. She's from the...
Fuck
yeah! She was born in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and then her parents moved to the Ozark Mountain region when she was about 6. But Appalachia has a very, very fucking strong root within her. They're ever present in her life. She's a resident of Arkansas. She works with the Fae, or the Gentry as they're called in her own culture. So there we go, back tying it into the kind of Fae, Scots-Irish thing. And she works with Spider Grandmother as a deity.
Yes!
Yes, I love Spider Grandmother.
Which, yeah, important in both Appalachia and within the Native American cultures. So, yeah.
Now, let's kick it over to this interview, man. I am, real excited for this shit. Let's do it.
The Faith Blind Council would like to give a big shout out to the Folk Magic Society. Based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, this group explores how people do magic around the world, including spells, divination, dolls, talismans, astrology, and more. Normally meeting at Mage's Books at 1848 Central Avenue on the second Saturday each month, they've recently expanded their presence by hosting online discussions. The host, Dave, is an archaeologist who shares a wealth of knowledge on the history of magic and spiritual practices. To learn more and join in an upcoming event, look for the Folk Magic Society on Facebook. We'd like to take this time to acknowledge our partnership with our sponsor, Welcome to Paradise. Not only do they carry occult and ritual items that have been personally vetted and created by practicing occultists, they've partnered up with the Faith Blind Council to provide you with exclusive offerings from your hosts. Tarot consultations by Dreadnought, hand-carved leather by Cologne, and custom talismans from Yaramarud are just a few of the items sold by Welcome to Paradise in their collection of occult artists. If you're a magical artist looking for a place to showcase your goods, why not join the Paradise team? Whether it's to sell your work or to add another piece to your collection, please visit our sponsors at welcometoparadise.com.
All right, well, we're here with Jennifer Bates. Really proud and happy to have her here as a representative of Appalachian Folk Magic.
Oh, thank you.
I'm actually really excited about this interview. It's one of those, Appalachian Folk Magic is a thing to me that is so, you don't see a lot of, hard answers about things. And because of that, it can seem so insulated that it can be intimidating for people to try and even research.
Oh no, it's hard for people outside of the culture to really try to hone in on what's correct and what's not. There's very little information out there, so this is exciting.
Right, and it's not just that there's so little information. I've heard from a lot of people that along with there being so little information, it is a dying art as well.
It really is, which is super sad.
So one thing that from some of the readings that I had read that I would like to ask you about, from just my own personal question, where did you learn it?
Well, mostly just my family. My father's side of the family are all from Appalachia. They are all very hardcore, hillbilly, wear their overalls with nothing underneath. They still take baths outside. They're very hardcore. And so I really learned a lot from them and the region that I kind of grew up in. And then I moved to the Ozarks, where a lot of that is still practiced. It's not quite Appalachian folk magic, but it is folk magic of the same variety. So, it's all around me all the time.
Okay. Did you learn from any particular person then?
Specifically, my mama. She's my great grandmother. She's 103 years old and still going strong.
Oh, Jesus.
So she's taught me a lot. She really, since I was little, has instilled all of the like superstition in me and everything, and taught me pretty much everything I know. So
that's amazing. Also, second personal question, because it kind of creeps me out. What is Spider Grandmother?
Well, we're just going swinging right at that one, huh?
Not super creepy. She's just a deity like any other deity, specific to folk magic, where she's basically the deity that she would be like if folk tradition was Christianity, Spider Grandmother would be God.
Okay.
It's said that, we're all like thoughts. Before we ever exist, we're just like a thought. Like, I want to be this, I want to do this. And so she weaves you into existence so that you can continue and, live out your fate that you wanted before you ever existed.
So she kind of is like a reverse psychopomp where a psychopomp like a Hades would take you to the being not alive anymore. Spider Grandmother is like, oh, these are the things you want. Like, here you go, have at it.
Yes, absolutely. She's
cool.
Kind of the kindest deities that we have. She loves people. She loves humans. That's why she weaves us all. So.
Okay, well, on that, what are some of the other deities that exist within Appalachian folk magic?
There's a few really like main ones that people really are hardcore about. Father Winter being one of them, Demeter being one of them. Father Winter is kind of like a cold-hearted. He brings the winter. He doesn't give a shit about people at all. Like very unforgiving deity, not kind of one that you would want to work with, just one that people believe in. You don't want to get caught outside in winter. You want to stay inside, leave your fire lit, things like that. He's kind of a dick.
Fair enough.
And Demeter, of course, is just kind of a goddess that represents fertility in the land. She's one of the main ones you would work with if you wanted to have your crops come up well and all that good stuff. So those are kind of the main ones.
Great. Okay, let's get into some of the questions that we have from our listeners. First of all, is moonshine used sacramentally?
It can be. Traditionally, folk people, we are Christians at our core. That's what it is. I'm not personally, but Christianity, a sacrament is typically wine because of Jesus. So you can use moonshine sacramentally in your own specific faith if that's what you do. It's more used for like offerings as far as on your altar. It can be used for the fae if you're into that kind of thing and offering to them. Moonshine can be used for a lot of different things, but not specifically sacramentally, but it can be.
So, like, one thing that I assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that is ubiquitous in folk magic in general, and I would assume kind of extends to Appalachian folk magic, is just the very, like, DIY attitude that comes with it. And I would imagine that's where kind of like moonshining kind of really plays a role, because it's like the most DIY kind of thing you can do in that regard.
It really is. They should put that shit on Pinterest. Yeah. All of it is very DIY. In folk culture in general, it's like a culture of necessity. What you got, make the best of it. So yes, that's definitely something that could tie into how it is used. It's definitely it's just a tradition of necessity. What you got, you use. Right
on. So speaking of moonshine and corn mash and shit, what's up with corn dolls?
Okay, there's not much up with corn dolls. They're, just a variation on a poppet that you would normally use, but they're typically used for fertility. Specifically either fertility of the land, or it can also be used to help you get pregnant. Those are the main uses for them. You can technically use a corn doll for pretty much anything you want, but specifically in tradition, it is for fertility of the land and fertility of the womb.
So, how would you use a corn doll then?
Specifically, like, let me think of a ritual. You say you wanted your wife to get pregnant. You would take a corn doll. You would put inside of it, like, maybe a piece of her hair or a fingernail clipping or something of that sort, to kind of tie it to her. And then you would build like a small miniature little altar around it, and kind of put your intention into that your wife will get pregnant. Say a little chant. I mean, folk magic is very simple. Just say a little chant and it's done. And then put that doll like somewhere near the person, in their purse or in their pocket. There's not much flash and ganache to it, really.
No, I kind of got that from like reading, like, yeah, you know about this, Dreadnought, the Long Lost Friend. Most of the like recipes in there are like 2-sentence long. Boom, that's what you do. This is how you solve it. Those are the words you say.
And one thing to kind of tack onto that I've always found very interesting about any kind of folk magic grimoire, I guess, for lack of a better term, is they read very much like a recipe book. And much like a recipe book, when you buy, a cookbook from somewhere, the basic knowledge of cooking is always like inferred. It's just assumed that the person reading it knows how to cook. So I would imagine, would it be fair to say that when you look at a recipe or a ritual in a folk magic tradition, the assumption is that the practitioner already knows how to do something?
Yeah, pretty much. It kind of is like an inferred thing. There's not, I don't know how to explain this. We don't know how to explain things in this culture, which is why it's so simple. But yeah, it's very much, it's kind of inferred that you just know it. It's in your tradition, you know it. If you don't know it, then you're fucked, I guess.
Well, I mean, that kind of makes sense where, you have difficulty explaining it. You just know.
Yeah. It's kind of a culture of, for so long, it had been very close-knit and not shown to the outside world. It was a family thing. It was very private and special. And now as it's dying off, more people are wanting to share. But it's kind of hard to, like, get that information out when it's just, like, something that you know.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's the way of, like, learning what a word is, right? Mm-hmm. You know what words do, you know how language functions, but, like, trying to teach somebody what the concept of a word is such, because it's so, like, ingrained into your communication style, or, like, describing the color red. You know what red looks like, but trying to describe that color is something that's very, like, alien, because you just know what red is. It's fucking red.
Exactly.
And I think this also kind of has to do with what I've heard from a lot, like, other texts that I've read, is that the practice itself, and part of the reason why it's hard to like spread the information of it, is it's very much tied to the land as well.
It is very much tied to the land, the specific regions, specific families. I mean, everyone does something a little bit different. The basics are there, but there's so much just in, like, say the foothills where my family is from, is entirely different kind of little things than someone, say, from up further in the mountains or from the Ozarks or somewhere else. So it's, again, hard to explain.
Right. Well, okay, this you just kind of reminded me of something else. We had talked earlier in our main episode about how with folk magic, there, at least as far as my perception, is it was usually a lot of practices were tied to, like, an individual that was kind of moved down. Like, you had water witchers, you had faith healers, but, like, most people in general didn't practice a whole lot of it, but it was, like, more, like, specifically for one family would do it, or one individual.
Yes, that's kind of how it is. Yeah, it kind of goes down the generational line. someone in your family or in your region would be specifically adept at a certain thing, say like faith healing or fertility or dowsing. And so that person would kind of become the paradigm of that for that region. And as they got older, they would find an apprentice of sorts, I guess, and kind of pass that on. But it is very individual.
Would you say that as an individual practitioner, having that type of, I guess, hierarchy, for lack of a better word, do you think that helps or hinders as far as like, you know, the overall idea of it being such an insulated thing? But do you think that's something that's a good or a bad for folk magic culturally, or do you think it's like really neither here nor there?
Neither here nor there. I mean, I think it's good. I think that anybody who has exceptional knowledge in any specific culture that's dying out, if they have excess knowledge of that and are more practiced in that, they should share that, especially if it's dying off. So I think it's good. I wouldn't call it a hierarchy, just I know a little bit more, I guess. Yeah,
and that's the thing. It feels like a dirty word to say it that way. I'm not really that smart of a dude, so I just use the words that come to mind.
That's perfectly fine.
But in that kind of, like what you had said, where, kind of generationally, people kind of have their own specialty, I guess, as it were. What would you say that your specialty is?
I don't know. I'm really kind of eclectic. I don't just practice folk magic as well. I'm well-rounded in all of it. I incorporate it a lot. I guess faith healing is kind of what I was taught my whole life, and I'm a little bit more adept at that than the rest. So I've got that kind of really ingrained into me, and I'm very good at that. But that's I mean, it's only just a smidge above everything else that I do. So.
And then, so what I'd like to transition into from there is really kind of talking about your platform and what it is you do, you know, with your YouTube channel, your Instagram and stuff like that, as far as kind of like documenting, you know, your experience and kind of making sure that there's a footnote there for people to go back to and be able to reference this culture.
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to do. I mean, obviously my channel is super rough. I'm a mess 24/7, but I do think that I have information that is important to get out, especially to keep this culture alive. And so if even like 100 years from now, someone finally like it blows up and a bunch of people get to see it and can kind of learn that culture, that's it for me. That's kind of what I want to do. Just like for people to be able to learn about such a hard culture to research.
That's really cool. And like I just as an aside, I want to say like the rough channels, the channels that aren't like or any kind of thing where like a cooking show. Nobody believes like a Rachel Ray cooking show. It's too perfect. Cooking is not that perfect. It's fucked up and like things go wrong and it's a mess. Like that's the shit that's important to see. I think the channels that are rough, right? That have kind of that like, yeah, well, you know, fuck it, the flour got everywhere, who cares? Like, that's the stuff that's important to see, that it's not perfect and that you are going to mess up and there are going to be mistakes made, but they're not the end of the world.
No, and that's like, those are the best tutorials too. Like, I was watching a fucking tutorial about how to make like lye out of ashes. It was a 17-minute video and it was 12 minutes of this dude stirring a bucket.
That's awesome.
But it's important to see. Like, it's important to see that, like, this takes time. You have to, like, a lot of it is waiting and doing this because you can't just expect it to be done. You have to put the work in to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this high-polished, highfalutin bullshit. Like, it's very down-to-earth shit. And I very much appreciate that.
But I'm always worried that like people are gonna see it and be like, "This is fucking garbage. This bitch is out of her mind. I'm gonna not watch this." So
I feel like that's a thing that everybody who deals with any kind of like esoteric topic that they're talking about, you have to kind of get over that fear, because like,
Yeah.
okay, eventually one of my coworkers is gonna see this, or whatever, and then you're like, ugh, and then you can just be like, oh, well, fuck it, I don't really like that guy that much anyways, who cares? And like,
Yeah.
I think the thing that really like shines through more so than like the and just in general, like any kind of like lack of polish or whatever, what shines through is confidence. And being able to really exude like, no, I know this works because I've done it.
Yeah.
Right, and especially with you having learned from like your great grandmother, who is as old as the mountains.
She really is.
So,
she still drives. She's 103 and she's still driving.
Jesus Christ.
I'm 32. I don't even like driving that much anymore.
They say only the good die young, and this woman is mean as a rattlesnake. So,
That's good. I can't imagine anybody who would be at that age with any level of honesty and not be kind of mean sometimes.
Oh yeah, you get that age and you're like, fuck everything. I'm older than all of you. Go die.
The only thing keeping you going is spite.
It really is. Every day she's like, God, I wish I'd just die already.
I feel like the fun thing about that is when you get to that age, you could just start making shit up. There's nobody around to fact check it. You could just like,
Right.
I met Kennedy twice. No one can tell you no. They can't say that. You can say whatever you fucking want.
No shit, I can't wait to get old.
Like, can I just skip straight to that? Like, get rid of all of the adulthood and just straight to being like 88 years old. I can just make up all the shit. And people have to believe it. You're not allowed to call old people liars. You just can't. You're not.
Yeah, it's fucked up. You can't do it.
So
You have to respect your elders so they can do whatever the fuck they want.
exactly.
Right, because they had to deal with your bullshit growing up.
Absolutely.
They're out there living their best lives.
So as far as your your YouTube channel, Instagram, when was it that you really kind of had this idea of like, I'm going to put this information out there? How did that kind of like, what's the story of all of that?
Well, I kind of wanted to do it for a really long time, and I was always just like putting it off for this reason or that reason. Like, oh, my camera's not good enough. I don't have enough time. I'm awkward. So eventually I was just like, fuck it, I may as well. And I started. It was really just a decision made over many years of wanting to, and then finally being like, who's going to really judge me? Who's going to laugh at me? People I fucking hate? That's cool.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that on a spiritual level.
No shit. It's just, it was hard to get started to like just say, you know what, I'm just gonna do it and like sit in front of it. And it's kind of hard when you're starting to like be normal on camera. It's super like awkward, and I'm awkward enough in real life, so it was like quadruple the awkward. But I pushed through, and I'm really happy I did it. So
No, I totally understand. Like we've been doing this for like over a year now. I still haven't listened to a single goddamn episode.
I haven't.
The way to do it. You can't know how cringy it is if you don't listen to it.
No.
I think you're great.
No.
And the rule is like, if you're going to go back and do that, it's the same as reading a comment section, right? You either have to read all of them or you don't read any of them. You can't like cherry pick them. And like Yara, you're in the enviable position of just not doing any of it, and it's great.
No.
Nope. I mean, props to you for fucking editing this shit and having to listen to my bullshit again. We did have one of our listeners who had watched your videos and had a question regarding it, saying that having watched your videos, they're reminded of reading about old druid ideas where every aspect of nature is meaningful if you know how to interpret it. Patterns of light through branches, swarming bugs, anything. You described the roots as coming together of Scots, Irish, and Cherokee, and they were wondering if the divination specifically connects back as far as druidism.
You know, I don't know. but it very well could. I feel like Druidism has a lot in common with folk magic in general, just because it is so about the earth. And so it's very possible that it could, because there's different divination things that people who practice Druidism today still do that are a lot like the divination from where I'm from. It's got its differences, but it's still kind of the same. So yeah, I think it very possibly could. I don't know specifically.
No, that's fair. Like, we had kind of already discussed how it's very much tied to the land. And I feel that, like, with Druidism, that was also very much the same kind of concept, except held within, the old world.
Mm-hmm. It is very much alike, so I wouldn't doubt it.
But you do mention the forms of divination you do. What are some of the forms of divination you practice, specifically within, like, Appalachian folk magic?
Okay, well, there's, yes or no questions, depending on what I have on hand, apple seeds, sunflower seeds, or really anything, quinoa, if that's all you've got in your cabinet.
Ugh, that's terrible, and you should just throw it the fuck out.
Well, I'm a vegan, so I like it.
Quinoa is like gravel. It's like edible, it's like grape nuts. It is like fucking grape nuts. If you just soak it long enough, then it's somewhat palatable. That's good. If you soak wood long enough, you can chew it.
I don't understand why you're bringing this up. You like all sorts of terrible things, though. Like, this seems right up your alley. You remember how long it took for you to come around and admit that you like gin?
Oh, gin.
Yeah.
Worse.
Yeah, I know. It tastes like you're licking Treebeard's asshole.
So awful.
But you get used to it. If I want, I'll chew grape nuts, because at least with grape nuts, you can soak it however long and you still break your goddamn jaw. But with quinoa, no, they give up halfway through. Fuck that wishy-washy, flim-flam bullshit grain.
Okay, so the technique when you're using seeds for divination, like, how exactly you're using that mostly for, like, yes or no questions?
Yes, it's a very yes or no kind of thing. If they're spread out evenly, that's usually a sign for yes, and if they're kind of clumped together in different ways, that's a sign for no. Or you can kind of make like a little, like a handkerchief or something like that, a piece of flannel, and kind of mark off areas on it for yes, no, maybe, or different things like that, and wherever they gravitate towards or are evenly spaced within the specific box. I don't know if I'm explaining this.
No. I can picture it, and I'm kind of drunk, so whatever, fuck it.
That's fantastic.
It sounds very very much similar to other forms of casting, where you're looking at the spread, you're looking at the overall result, rather than like looking for specific patterns. You're just you're reading everything in aggregate.
I mean, there's a lot of different folk scrying that I do. There's some, you get a clear bowl and you kind of like rub oil inside of it and you hold it up to the light. That's been used for a really long time. My mama did that. And it works well if you're really in tune with your intuition. Really any of the ways of scrying, like bowls of dirt, bowls of sand, mud, shit like that. That's all. If you're good and in tune with your intuition, it's a really easy way to divine things, and it's really simple. And it's like free. So,
okay. With both of you mentioning this, Dreadnought mentioning casting, and you, Jennifer, having mentioned that you're vegan. How do you feel about doing the whole like vulture culture thing, or using bones? Or like even fucking roadkill or some shit.
Yeah, I'm totally cool with that. I love to use bones in my craft. I will repurpose. Like, I used to live on a farm, and there's tons of animals that just die out there all the time. And so, yeah, I'm totally great with that. The reason that I'm vegan is more of like the agricultural industry is killing the planet, so that's kind of why I went vegan. But as far as like repurposing bones and using them for my craft, yeah, I think that's great. I don't see any issue with it at all.
Okay. No, I just didn't know because like I've known some people who were either vegetarian or vegan, and just any animal product whatsoever they're kind of queasy about, even if it was like, eh. But then again, you're from Appalachia, so like.
I fucking love meat. I fucking love it. It doesn't make me sick at all. I made a choice to do something kind of like for the planet. And so that's kind of why I'm doing it. So it has nothing to do with animal parts grossing me out. I'm definitely not, it's not an issue for me.
Fair enough. Okay, so when did you first discover the world of magic?
Honestly, you can't even remember. Like, it's just been my whole life, really. Learning about just what my great grandmother had to teach me, and we always had like little fairy gardens in our backyard. And when I was really little, I was always told to go throw out the bread and the butter for the fairies in the morning. Like, it was just a thing. So I've just grown up with it my whole life. It's never been a question to me.
Was there ever like a specific time where it kind of like moved past like a tradition to the point where you knew like, no, what I'm doing is actually real, like this is affecting shit?
Yeah, well, I'd say I was maybe 13 or 14, and my mama had a woman over. She had had 4 miscarriages. She was just like really desperate to get pregnant and not lose the baby. And she had gotten pregnant. She had gotten pregnant, and my mama did some kind of bullshit to her. And this woman was a healthy twin pregnancy. And I was like, well, fuck. Okay, it works.
Okay, so this kind of leads me to a tangential question that had come up in one of our previous episodes. We had talked about people's like the openness of their practice, and one of the themes that came up in a lot of people's answers was, you know, having children and talking to children about you know, their practice or you know, just magic in general. With your experience of it being something that's so integral to your community and your culture and your family, what would you say to people that have questions about bringing up a practice to a child or to, you know, someone who's entering like adolescence?
That's a good question. I would say it's really just like, don't push it upon kids. Don't like make it a real serious like thing, like cloak and dagger shit. Just really kind of like lightheartedly introduce it into their lives as like, oh, this is just a little thing. This is just a little thing. And like, this is what I do. And just kind of like religion, just don't force it. But I mean, if you want them to know about it, teach them about it in like an educational way, but that's not super serious.
We actually had one person who had brought up something that I really liked in regards to that, where they were talking about like reading tarot cards, and their toddler, I think, or might have been 4 or 5 years old. They were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And so they just laid the cards out and were saying, "Well, we use these cards to tell a story."
That's really good. I like that. Yeah.
That was so that was the owner. There's a local shop around where Yara lives, and I'm blanking on the name of it. The place,
Catalpa?
Yeah, it was the guy from Catalpa.
Okay,
had talked about that, and it was a really cool thing. We had since tried that, and it like worked really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
and
think
like,
that's great. That's perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of how I read tarot anyway, because like I'm fucking terrible at memorizing like the traditional meanings of shit. So like I read things primarily on like what you had said, like with intuition. You know based on what you see, and it's the same with me reading cards. Like I'm just telling a story based on what is laid out in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's the best way to do tarot anyway, really. It's more intuitive. It's more like in tune with you and what you're trying to find out. So,
and I think one of the things that really gets lost with divination in general, right? My view is that like any form of divination is just a map for you to tap into your intuition. And
exactly.
with that in mind, what a lot of people lose is, like, one of the hardest parts of divination is crafting that narrative. If you look at just the individual pieces, like just the individual cards in a tarot spread, or just the individual planets in somebody's natal chart, really all you're doing is you're focusing on the symbol, and you're not seeing the picture that the symbols are laying out. And I think a lot of people get lost in that, and they fail to understand the importance of crafting a narrative when you're doing divination, because that's what really is it creates the links and the ability to really identify with a given reading, whatever that reading might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really hard to train yourself to do, because it's not something that your brain wants to do, well, at least mine didn't, but it takes time and learning your intuition, how to weave your little story throughout all the little tarot cards, which is why I don't do a whole lot of tarot. I do a bunch of different forms of divination. Tarot I kind of suck at.
Fair enough. No judgment.
Because I'll tend to find one little thing that's very negative within my whole spread, and I'll be like, fucking shit, I can't do this anymore.
Oh, no. Like, my favorite deck, it's like all just Debbie Downer. It's terrible, and I love it for that.
I feel like there was a reading tangentially that I had done for Yara some years ago, where I think it was like the first card I pulled was the Tower, and the second card was the Devil, and Yara was just like, okay, stop. We're just done.
No. It wasn't that fucking long ago. You were just laying shit out, and I'm like, yeah, you just pointed out my life's a dumpster fire. We don't need to keep going, because I know this. Just move on. Just fucking shuffle the cards again. I'm a dumpster fire.
But I think it's a point that can apply to any form of, like, casting, whether you're casting bones, runes, whether you're doing, tea leaf divination, whatever it is that you're doing, is there is a narrative there, and the ability to tap into your intuition is what really drives that. Where I feel like tarot is something that a lot of people begin with because there's so much symbolism to draw from. You have 78 cards, and they all have all of this shit going on. Whereas if you're looking at, casting a set of runes, and then you just kind of look at them like, well, okay, what does this mean? You really have to be in tune with that intuition to be able to see the narrative there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I had this discussion with someone on our Discord server months ago, where basically, like, I had explained to them what divination was. Like, I had basically told them, like, as far as I perceive it, divination, I cannot foretell your future. Rather, what it is I am using anything, and these things I am using as a prompt in order to tell a story that you are somehow going to link into your own life. And in doing so, it's going to give you a perspective that you probably didn't see before. So it's not so much like I'm fucking reading your future. No, it's rather I'm using these things to provide a perspective that you probably didn't see.
That's exactly what it is. I don't like when people are like, I can tell you your future right now with these cards. Like, no, you fucking can't. Go away. But yeah, it's just creating a narrative to, like, help someone in their own mind see this, like, perspective, this map of where to go and what to do to make your future happen.
Yeah, I've recently kind of gotten really interested in, like, astrology and natal charts. And that's the thing I've really realized about that, is it's not telling you what your life's trajectory is. What it really is reverse engineering your personality traits. You have this set of symbols, you have a background on which you're reading it, and you have it's divided up into these certain degrees. And through looking at it that way, you are applying the symbols to yourself as opposed to applying yourself to the symbols.
My natal chart still says I'm a dumpster fire.
Well, yeah, because you're really in tune with it. You know what you are.
Oh my God.
So let's move on. One thing that I've always kind of had as an outsider from like culturally looking at all these different forms of folk magic, Appalachian folk magic, Southern American conjure, Louisiana hoodoo. One thing that I've always has been my perception, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that there's not so much a hard line of things, whereas like in practice, it's very kind of gradient as far as like you see the same kind of techniques and the same procedures, but because it's, folk magic is so land dependent and like region dependent, where you see the changes are like what's available to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so subjective from person to person and family to family. I mean, there are no hard lines with it. It's, you use what you got.
Very cool. So, like, one question I would have about that, if you look at, again, just using as an example, like Louisiana voodoo and hoodoo, there's a very hard distinction between voodoo is the religion, it's the, the theology, I guess, whereas hoodoo is the practice. In Appalachian folk magic, is there a distinction, or does it all kind of just run together?
Really, it all kind of just runs together. There's no real distinction. The religion of hill folk is typically Christian, Baptist. So it's really, there's no line. It all runs together.
Okay, well, speaking of that, like, someone had asked, how do English, Irish, and Welsh folk magic influence Appalachian folk magic? But I'm also interested, like, can you distinctly tell the difference where, like the Scots-Irish comes in with, like, the Cherokee comes in with the, like, African traditional?
Yeah, so really the Scots-Irish, when we came down, we brought our superstitions and our faith healing. And when we got down here, we met the Cherokee and also like the Hopi and the Osage Indians as well taught us some things. They taught us medicinal herb healing and their own lore and stories. So it kind of melded there. But really all of the superstition and little things like carry an iron nail in your pocket and shit like that, that is all from Europe coming down to the mountains. And all of the more medicinal things like certain herbs for certain things, etc., that really comes from the native tribes that were here. And as far as African traditions coming into it, we really don't see a lot of that in Appalachian folk magic specifically. It's more kind of in the Southern conjure that you'll see that specific influence. So
would is there something like, what would you say is the thing? Okay, so if everything exists in gradient and like kind of the visualization I get is kind of a wave going, right, where you can see like maybe at this peak you could tell from this peak and this peak the difference between, conjure and Appalachian folk magic. Do you think that there's any like, what would you say is the thing that really ties it all together and makes it so hard to really distinguish, especially from like an outsider's point of view, versus what makes it harder to distinguish, or like what are the distinguishing characteristics from somebody who is a part of that community?
That's a good question. I think really the distinction between the two, they kind of run together when they get to things that are like, say, like faith healing. All of the rituals for that can look very much the same from an outside perspective, that kind of thing. The divination can be very much the same. Using poppets and corn dolls and things like that, they can all look very much the same. So from an outsider perspective, it can all seem muddy and all run together. But from an inside perspective, there's a lot of little differences. Like, I'm not the expert on all Southern conjure, but I do know that bone casting is a thing that's typically not really done that much in folk magic. I mean, it can be. We'll read anything, but it's not something that, like, it's kind of integral to conjure and not very integral at all to folk magic from Appalachia or the Ozarks. So There's just little distinctions that only someone on the inside would really pick up on.
Okay, and would you say that's something that, again, I feel like the kind of the theme here is that it's a thing of necessity, right? Where that's something that, like, it's because you have so many things in your region that are so much more readily available. Of like, well, why am I going to go spend 6 hours trying to find a suitable carcass to then spend 2 weeks cleaning the bones from and have all of this stuff, versus being able to just, like, I can go outside and pick up, some dirt to cast in a bowl right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very much of necessity. It's not, I mean, really in Appalachian magic, Ozark, Mountain Magic, Southern Conjure, all of it really is a magic of necessity and of use what you have. But there is a kind of a distinction with, like, other traditions that are outside of, say, Appalachian folk magic. They're a little bit more, I don't know the right word to use here. Like, I don't know how to explain it. They're a little bit more hard-nosed on what specific things you need. Whereas in hillbilly magic, really, you can make anything mean anything, and you can use anything for anything, except for certain healing herbs that you need for specific healing practices.
Okay, so it's much more circumstantial versus like something like like a different regional folk magic that it has more structure to it of being able to, like, really sit down and know, like, okay, this herb is used for this herb is used for that. Whereas it seems like, from what you're saying, it's kind of it's actually very similar to the idea of chaos magic in general, where you can assign meaning to whatever you have at hand, provided that's what your intent is.
Exactly. I think it is all about intention, especially with kind of folksier forms of magic. It's really all about your intention, your belief, and that kind of thing. So, don't get caught up in the specifics of this does this and this does this, because it doesn't fucking matter.
Fair enough. One thing that I would like to ask is, so, as we had already previously discussed, the entire concept of Appalachian folk magic is a dying art. How do you feel that this coincides with the stereotype of Appalachian people being a very insular culture?
I mean, it's true. It is a very insular culture. We don't like outsiders much. It's a whole tradition of not really wanting to be involved with anyone else. Yuppies, it's very close-knit, keep to your family, your region kind of thing. It's a pride thing also. Like, from the outside world's perspective, they're just a bunch of fucking hillbillies with no teeth. But from an inside perspective, they have a very prideful culture, and they don't feel any need to interact with the outside world and be judged when they're better.
So, in that aspect, do you feel as though you're stepping outside of your culture?
Little bit, yeah. But I also feel like, I don't think it's disrespectful in any way. I think it is important to kind of spread this culture around because it is dying, and I know that my mama would not want her entire life's work to die out one day and never be heard of by anyone again. So
right, yeah. So it's more of like a preservation rather than like a sideshow.
Yeah, it's very much about creating documentation of what's going on. I think that one thing, I and this is purely conjecture on my part, where you see a lot of insular cultures comes from either either perceived or very real fear of being exploited. Again, you look at rural culture, and these people are looked down upon, and the fucking no teeth, they didn't make it all the way through the 3rd grade for nothing, and they're made fun of until they're needed, and then they're exploited based on that lack of conventional education where, okay, well, they didn't go to college, so I guess we can pay them shit money for whatever the thing is, right? And the easiest way from being, I would imagine if you're in a culture or your culture is very, exploitable, the easiest way to avoid that is to just shut off any kind of, communication or shut off any kind of opening where that exploitation could then come in. So the logical conclusion, I would imagine, is to just not talk about it. You don't just go around talking to people about the stuff you do, because A, they're going to spread rumors about you, and B, when the time comes that they're finally, ready to admit that they might need something, they're going to come in and try and fucking swindle you.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. It's hard for people in this culture to trust anyone, that even someone from the outside that seeks their help and seems to be kind can be seen as someone exploitative. We've been used for years for our music, and people stealing, folk traditional music, people stealing our superstitions, and just coming in and trying to make this culture theirs and taking it away. And I think that's something that we've always been really fearful of, and that the families in my region, that's kind of why it is so tight-knit and insular. They don't want their culture being stolen or misused or exploited.
And I feel like, we'd talked about this in a prior episode, in which, it feels to me, anyway, that a lot of magical practice tends to stem from people who lack autonomy. And so they don't have they don't have everything they possibly could. And so you have these people from Appalachia who are traditionally poor, and they're living in the mountains, and what happens is, in West Virginia, where they just throw bodies at the coal mines until all of the coal's gone. And so because of this, they have no autonomy. All they can do is just thrive off what land and what resources they have.
And that was a point that I wanted to bring up as well, is it's not even just, some kind of phobia. It's the empirical evidence is there. This is a region, a land that has just been absolutely exploited for its resources.
Oh, yeah.
And then once those resources are depleted, the people that have done the exploiting are like, okay, sorry about your day, see you later, good luck with the black lung, and they don't do shit about it. Why would you invite that into your culture? I completely understand that.
Absolutely.
Right. And it goes even further than that, where after they have gone, after all of these companies have gone and they've been left behind, that's where you get all of this shit. There was that documentary, The Wonderful World of Whites, where it was just the white family from West Virginia who, they don't have anything anymore. Their family had grown up in the coal mines and shit. What's there to do now? Well, there's living in the hills and getting fucked up on opiates and huffing gas. That's what we got now. It could be worse. We could live in Russia with the crocodile and have my goddamn arm fall off. But at least, I can tell, what octane of gas it is based on its bouquet.
But in all seriousness, do you think that that mentality carries over even into present time?
Oh, yeah, definitely. My mama she pretty much hates everybody in general, but especially...
Yeah, because she lives on spite.
She does. She lives on spite and corn. It's the last thing her dentures are able to chew. She didn't even want to get dentures. She thought that was kind of an evil thing. She's I don't want to get some fancy new teeth from some dentist. But we made her get dentures so that she could still eat.
You have to eat.
I know, it's a thing. That's how you keep living out of spite. You can't not eat.
Yeah, so you eat as hatefully as possible.
Exactly.
Just stare everyone down while you're chewing the corn.
That's what she does.
If you can frown more while you're eating, you're good.
That's exactly how it goes. I don't even like to go to lunch with her anymore. She just shoots daggers into me while she's munching on her food.
It's all out of self-preservation, though. That's the thing you have to realize.
Ugh, it's terrible. Yeah, it's very ingrained in the culture. I feel like a lot of the older generations from that region are very, very much like that, full of just spite and hate. But it's for a good reason. And it's not that they hate their lives. They just hate this idea that they're in a metropolized city now with all these people that would have exploited them years ago. It's kind of like a hard pill to swallow.
Well, yeah, it's hate that's born of disenfranchisement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, I totally understand that. Where like it continues so much, like even in things like language, like you, Jennifer, just saying things like Meemaw, people would look down on you. Just for that.
Crafting my accent so that it would not sound like I was from the mountains, specifically for the purpose of not getting judged.
No, like none of us care. Like I've studied like language and shit, and I absolutely hate prescriptivism where it's like, no, like you need to speak English properly. Fuck you. The entire idea like of language is to get an idea across. And if as long as you're getting that idea across, language succeeded. That's it. So like there's no proper English. There's no like all that is classist bullshit.
It really is, absolutely. And now I can't genuinely, like, authentically have that accent back. I've spent so long, like, around people that said that if I talk that way, I sound uneducated. And so I spent a lot of time trying to sound educated so that I could get better places in life. And I really kind of regret it now because it's kind of a bullshit thing, really. I'm still working a garbage job, living in a fucking apartment. So what the fuck did all the fancy talk get me?
Right? Like, it's...
Right.
You assimilate, you assimilate and you step and you step and you step until suddenly, like, it's gone, right? It's very much like this, it's killing them softly. You're literally getting rid of something a step at a time and a step at a time and concession after concession after concession until, like, that culture is eradicated. But
yeah.
The idea that doesn't happen is just an absurd farce to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and it's even classist bullshit as far as you said. It's saying like, oh, they pronounce things in a certain way. They're uneducated. Well, okay, it's not my goddamn fault that, you know, the GDP of West Virginia is like $50. So, like, I can't help that. And so like, oh, we'll just look down on them because of how they speak. It's such fucking bullshit. But like, as far as like uneducated shit, like, I have a fucking college degree. I work in a goddamn factory. Like, what good has my college education gotten me? I still work in a goddamn factory.
And like, even worse than that, and not to like get overly like technical about it, but like, we used to work together doing the same job. I do not have a college degree. We made the same money. Like, they didn't even value, they don't even value the education differently. It not only does it give you no further opportunity, it doesn't even value the opportunity that you have. So
absolutely, yeah. There's really no fucking value at all to a college degree anymore, other than to say you're fucking educated.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're doing something like, unless you're pursuing, like, you know, your MD or something like that, there's not a lot that's really, there's no reason for me to have a BFA in, you know, sound design. I can get that experience, I can get it practically by working.
All my college degree got me was the ability to say that I was able to bullshit people for 4 years.
No shit.
That's what I got.
It's a quantifiable way of you to show that you know language this much better than somebody.
Yeah, and you know what? Yeah, I know language better than anyone else, and I don't give a shit how anyone talks.
So there we have an expert opinion about how little proper English matters.
It doesn't. It's all fucking classist bullshit. And more often than not, it tends to be racist as fuck.
It really is. A lot of people think that the word axe, instead of saying ask, is a racial thing. But originally, rich white European settlers were the ones that said axe, and it turned into like the slaves started saying axe, and that's why it's kind of like an urban thing now. But it's really a lot of language.
Yeah, there's another thing within what's termed African American vernacular English. The verb, the habitual be. It is a tense that does not exist within standard English. The habitual be. So like if one of your friends is like, "Hey, where's your boyfriend?" and you say he be working. That be implies he is in the habit of working. You should know that right now he is working just like he always is working. As opposed to he is working. No, it's he be working. It's the habitual be. It is a separate tense that we do not have in standard English. And to say that shit is uneducated is classist, racist bullshit.
So to bring it kind of back in, as far as your experience and you kind of really documenting what it is that you are, practicing and what you've done with your life, how, if at all, would you say it has changed your practice or changed your life?
I mean, it really hasn't that much. It's just, I've been the same my whole life. And no matter what I do, as far as YouTube or Magic or this or that, it really doesn't change too much about the situation that I live in and the person that I am. I mean, all of that is kind of static. So
that's fair. No, I can appreciate that. Like, and the fact, it hasn't really changed my life because it's been a part of your life your whole life. Like you had said, you didn't really. Like, things didn't really click that shit was happening until you were in your teens.
Mm-hmm. It's been like a whole lifetime of learning and soaking in and being so used to it and so, surrounded by it that it doesn't much impact my daily life or, just really me. Like, I can imagine as someone, maybe a newbie, discovering this and kind of trying to find their way in it, having a very strong impact. But for me, it's something that I've just lived with since I was little. So
all right, so on that kind of tangent, what would you suggest to a newbie, someone who is interested in Appalachian folk magic? What advice would you give them?
Watch my YouTube channel.
Shameless plug. No, it's fine. I'll take it. That was going to be the thing I was going to transition into next is, where can people find your stuff? What is, where can we find you on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, wherever the fuck? Which signpost can they go to see you shouting, whatever it is you're shouting about?
Well, on YouTube, I'm under the Inner Beauty Guru. There's a little dash between inner and beauty. And on Instagram, it's innerbeautyguru.onyt. And I'm on Twitter, but it's fucking stupid, and I'm not ever really on it, so don't fucking follow me there.
I feel that.
Thank you.
Twitter's dumb.
Yeah.
I'm never on it. What kind of advice would you, apart from watching your YouTube channel, clearly, because you know what you're talking about?
Kind of learn your own local herbage and plants and foliage, and get to know what you've got available to you for free, because that is the root of folk magic, is really just using what you can get. And then kind of just gather things that are around you and don't spend any fucking money. And do research about things like dishwater, stump water, flannel. Those are all very integral.
Fucking spunk water.
Yeah. That's a name for it.
Yep. Fuck.
A lot of people are very turned off by that.
Go figure.
This tree smells like hot cum.
There's gotta be something magical about it.
This is a magical tree. It smells like hot cum.
Not advice I would give anyone. Not for you.
Well, shit. I think that's pretty much where we're at. Were there any other listener questions? Anything else that we wanted to get in here real quick?
No, I think that about covers it.
All right. Well, rock and roll. Once again, thank you so much, Jennifer, for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me.
One thing that I would like to say is I made it a point on our Discord server, and I would like for the people that we interview to have a place on there, so that way for any like follow-up questions or anything, they're like, you are available on our Discord server, and so that way if anyone has anything after listening to this, they can always just shoot you a message.
Okay, not shoot me, just a message. Okay.
Yeah.
The pause between shoot you and a message had me worried.
Yeah. Happens.
Well, it's purely a grammatical quirk. That's what we'll call it.
Grammatical quirk.
Once again, thank you so much for being on our show. Everybody, make sure you go check that shit out. The Inner Beauty Guru on YouTube. Very fucking cool shit. I'm like very excited to learn more about and like integrate the practicality of folk magic, and instead of like, oh, everything has to be done at this and that and with these. Fuck it, just do the thing. It'll be fine.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you looking for one-of-a-kind handmade tools to add to your left-hand path practice? West of Hell masterfully crafts items ranging from leather masks to wands made from authentic human bone, all to aid you in your crusade against the tyranny of the demiurge. Prayer beads consecrated to Lucifer or Hecate, hand-etched magic mirrors, and even Chaos Star inverted rosaries are all part of their expanding inventory. Get started on your journey to bring down the powers and elevate your own godhood with tools, jewelry, and apparel from West of Hell. Visit them online at westofhell.square.site. That's WESTOVHELL.square.site.
Fuck, man, that, yeah, I learned a lot of shit there. I am not, what's the word I want to say here? Like, it's not, excited isn't the right word. Where you learn shit, but it's less douchey than enlightened.
Inspired?
Yeah, there we go.
Good one.
I'm a wordser. Don't you don't you fucking worry about it. I'm really, really excited to like dive more into this.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, like, because I feel like there's a certain level of perceived inaccessibility, and I think it's really cool that, you know, there are people out there that are working to kind of like break that up.
Right. Well, I mean, even me personally, just like from the books that I had read, like I was incredibly inspired in my own practice, especially with the whole concept of the, you know, Ancestor Veneration within it, and, you know, learning from your forefathers or whatever, to the point where, like, both of my grandmothers are dead. My paternal grandmother, I had not seen her grave in like 12 years. I went out there and like spoke to her, like sat at her graveside, spoke to her. I collected some of her grave dirt. My maternal grandmother, I sent like a digital tape recorder to my mother, and I was like, hey, just tell me everything that you can remember about your mom. I want to know everything. Just tell me stories. I want to hear more stories about my grandmother.
Yeah, that's like, it's something that's like really cool, you know, that you can start to look back and really look back at, you know, your familial history and see things that like were there that might not have been talked about because it was just assumed.
Right, and I mean, even in one of the books that I had read, the whole concept of generational things was extremely prevalent. Like, there were even, like, generational curses. Your grandfather was cursed? Well, you're fucked, because you're probably cursed, too.
Yeah, and, like, yeah, that's weird. Yep. Like, thanks, Granddad.
I didn't ask for this!
Alright, well, fuck, man. It's time. We're moving on. We're going into quests.
God, it's still weird.
Just, it's less weird than saying homework or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Assignments. That
seems a bit more like academic and formal. This has a nice RPG feel to it.
Yeah, it feels like a game.
That came out good.
I'm saving and isolating that audio forever of just Yara.
Take it. It's yours.
Well, let's fucking get into it. So, last episode, we talked about non-paradigmal magic, and my challenge, my quest, was to start working with the system that we've been creating.
Yep. So that's a question. That's a lead into. Okay. Yeah. So I had chosen segue into yellow was what I decided to start working in. I have to say it hasn't been very easy. I went through and did the the servitory creation ritual for yellow after spending at least a week this time meditating on this, you know, our egregore. But I'm still working on what the color means to me, and I still am not entirely certain what my servitory does yet. But I just gonna keep kind of working on that. So not a whole lot to report other than working a lot more on meditation. Very much with this color.
Do you have any like aspects of the servitor, like a sigil, a name for it? I mean, you don't have to share it now if you don't want to.
Yeah, I've got a sigil and a name.
Do you have any other like correspondences or?
Not really, not yet.
Those are things that'll probably come from working with it. Like, so I'm working through yellow right now, and I can confirm yellow is kind of a motherfucker. Like, it's one of the, like, and we had this discussion on the Discord server. Yellow is one of the hardest colors to work through because it requires a lot of honesty, and that honesty is not always pretty.
Yeah, and like the type of meditation I've been doing has been different. It's more of, I think there's a specific name for the type, but it's more like you're asking yourself questions, and you're kind of like asking a question, then asking another question, well, why that? And then that is more exploratory rather than just observing or being still or some other form of
insight meditation.
Meditation. And insight, that's it. That's the word.
Yeah, so it's insight meditation or like Zazen. Zazen does the same shit. Like, and it's not like, it takes you to some pretty heavy places. Like, there's there's absolutely no like set rule about where that's going to take you because it's so individualistic, you know?
Yeah, I mean, even, like, I would say probably, like, I had a couple really rough, kind of depressive days, I think, as a result of working with it to some extent. Not that that's bad, it's just something I had to work through, and it's, my way of working through it was, well, to have a couple days where I was kind of depressed.
Yeah, on the Discord server, I remembered, at least for me personally, I know I had listed, like, the 3 different levels for me, having worked through the colors before. Which, for me, the easy ones were purple, blue, and orange. those ones just came pretty quickly. There wasn't so much there wasn't so much insight or introspection involved with it, and that kind of boosted up a little bit with the next level, which I had as like intermediate, which was green and red. It got a little harder, and I had to like work through my own shit a little bit more. But then the last that were the hardest for me was black, yellow, and octarine.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that like yellow and octarine are colors that in my mind are so closely related, like that it makes them both hard. Like really, you have to take a hard look at yourself when you're doing those colors. And, you know, some people, like, for some people, they don't. But, like, for me, yellow has been a color where I've had to really look at habits that I have.
Yeah.
I've had to really, like, yellow has a lot been about, like, so orange was very much about me being able to call out bullshit, right?
But you're pretty good at that already.
Yeah. And that's, like, orange wasn't, like, yellow has been a lot about me calling out bullshit on myself, which is a much different beast. It's a lot harder to, like... Everybody has an exceptionalist bias. Everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule, right? And, like, yellow has very much been me looking in a mirror and saying, but that's bullshit because X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's that whole, like... What I was going to say was, like, you're taking that whole, that reflection or deflection towards anything, and you're just casting whatever mirror that you put on other people back on yourself.
Yeah.
And that's fucking hard.
So yeah, I mean, congratulations. Like, when you get this one done, you'll have one of the hardest ones done.
It could take me a little while, but, you know, my name's Cologne, I'll take my time.
Exactly. And, like, I want to say this again for the sake of repetition and to put it out there again. There is nothing saying that you have to do these things in a set amount of time. Like, a week is just a baseline number that was put out, you know?
Yeah, it's completely arbitrary.
Some people take longer, some people take shorter. The only reason I'm limiting myself to a week is just because that's the number that I put out when I wrote the fucking, like, little section down in the pamphlet. Was I wrote down 7 days. So I'm holding myself to that just to see, like, okay, is this actually feasible?
Yeah.
Should that be something that should be changed? And by and large, I don't think so, but I think, like, if I step outside of my own practice and think about people that are coming at this from a more, like a less assured foothold, right?
Yeah, it's certainly
like,
less experience, like, you know, where I'm coming from.
A week is probably not enough.
Yeah, I just didn't feel like it is or was. I still think I have a lot to work with within that one.
Which, and I had actually heard someone from the Discord server. They had told me that your position working within the non-paradigmal stuff, Cologne, was particularly inspirational to them because they kind of went through the same sort of thing you've gone through, in which they, to quote them, they struggle to inherit unbelief wholeheartedly, particularly having to do with a deity.
Yeah.
And so to them, it was like with non-paradigmal shit, you lose all of that. You don't have to worry about, like, oh, well, there's a higher whatever. I don't fucking believe in any of it. I'm just believing in what I am doing now.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's, like, really, like, an important distinction with the egregore shits that we made for this. They aren't supposed to be deified. They aren't meant to be figureheads of anything. They're just representations of that color of magic with an extra step put in so that you don't associate it as freely. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it does, you know? And, like, the whole, you know, clause in there about, like, oh, you add to the collective understanding of this egregore. It's just that by you doing this and sharing your experience, you're helping other people on their path as they go through it, you know?
Ostensibly, what's happening, we've written an alphabet. It's up to you to write a book.
Yeah, it's crowdsourcing a fucking system of magic. you know?
Yeah.
And, like, it's cool. But, like, you know, fucking, honestly, starting with yellow, that's a real, like...
Bold choice.
That's a baller fucking move.
It's just the one I felt I wanted the most work in at this time. So.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I applaud you, like, legitimately and seriously. That is, like, that's a step that not very many people would take. And for you to do that it shows a lot of character. That's the nicest thing I'll ever say.
I'll take it.
You're a piece of garbage.
I
know. So let's move on to the next quest. And real quick, I'm just going to take the onus off of this and kind of shatter the fourth wall here. These are obviously pre-recorded episodes, and it's not always exactly a month between when we record. Between recording the last episode and this episode, there was like a little over a week. So with that in mind, let's talk about the progress you've made with Yara's quest.
Yeah, it's an inspiration of like the creepy pasta rituals, basically, just to create a ritual of, you know, whoever I had around is great, and not knowing exactly what it would do or anything. And I had, you kind of sat on it a little bit, and I had a few ideas, and I had one I was thinking of doing that involved like mirrors facing each other, seeing between them and stuff. But then I got another idea, which is either a great idea or absolutely ridiculous. I don't know which.
Yes.
So
both.
So
I love it already.
My idea was to have a ritual in which you are creating the ritual while you're doing it, so it's entirely random.
Like a procedurally generated ritual?
Yes.
Oh my god, that's fucking genius.
And so my current concept of how I'm going to do this is using cards. I always have blank index cards. They're one of my favorite things to write notes on shit. So that to start with, probably start with just doing some meditation, trying to get into a somewhat gnosis state, and then on the cards, start putting things on them. I was thinking things like cardinal directions, things like, hey, draw a few sigils, things you have around that you could use, like light a candle, place a mirror, maybe certain, herbs or whatever tools you have around, and put them on different cards, and then I shuffle the cards up and just start kind of drawing them. And you might have to draw 1, 2, 3 of them in order to get a few together enough for that first step to make sense. So maybe you might draw something that's like north, light a candle with a sigil. And you're like, okay, so my first step is to light a candle facing north and draw the sigil, or spend time with the sigil or something like that. And then you draw another card, and that takes you to something else you have to do, or something else you have to use, and you have to incorporate it on the spot. What you're going to do with that thing, or how it's going to lead into the next one.
You know what you could do for that is you could separate, like, you could make, like, 3 different decks or, like, stacks.
I think... Okay, continue with what you think about that, because I had a similar idea.
So basically, you would have the stacks laid out, right? You would have, okay, this is a stack of correspondences.
Yes.
This is a stack of components or reagents or whatever word you want to use, like physical things that you have. And then step 3, this is a stack of actions that you would take.
Yeah, that was another idea I had too, was how I would divide the stacks up to have different things to interact. Yeah.
No, first of all, I would like to say that I am like, I am super hard about this. Like, this is phenomenal, and it's fucking amazing, and I applaud you in this. Like, yeah, this is awesome. But secondly, I would like to say, like, no shit, this is going to take you a while, because what I would suggest, if you haven't done so already, is to go through books on correspondences, or go to fucking, I think, like, creepypasta.com,
Yeah.
And they have, like, a tag that is just about, like, ritualistic weird shit. Go through that, and you have to compartmentalize all of these fucking rituals and break them into their individual components.
Yeah.
Like, this'll take a while, and I want to hear your progress in the future. Please do not stop this, because this is dope as fuck.
Yeah. What you're saying about reading through, like, the creepypastas and stuff, that's kind of when the idea came to me, because I was, like, reading and just noticing all these elements being used and stuff over again, and then, I don't know, just suddenly thought, like, whoa. And then I was thinking about our divination last time was, like, that I would do all this, like, last minute without plan. I'm like, what if I did this so last minute I literally made it up on the spot, but it's randomly generated, like, ritual that I didn't even know what the ritual is or what it does till I'm done with it.
Please stop! My penis can only get so erect.
So here's, and I would like to, if I could make a suggestion about this, because I kind of have an idea for a ritual in my head that would come from this, right? So you would have those cards, like, in however many categories, you know, like correspondence, component, action, right? You would draw those cards 4 times, one set, like one from each pile for each cardinal direction, right?
Yeah.
You then do those things in those cardinal directions, and you would roll a die or something to figure out where you start at first. You then go around the cardinal directions, you do all of those steps, and then result.
Yeah, that was like my original vision of it was, like, around the cardinal directions. I'd like it to be able to break outside of that, because obviously, like, I'd like it to be even more random if possible. But obviously, you kind of know somewhat what the structure of the ritual might be before you start, depending on what cards you decide to use or what elements you put into your random generator, you know? And as you're saying, like, one that you very specifically, this is going to resolve around the cardinal directions and stuff, but is there a way to incorporate it so that it can break out of something that's structure?
Honestly, once you do this, like, if you get it to a point where you have, like, taking Dreadnought's idea, having different decks or whatever, once you get, and you can continue to add on to, like, add into your databank for fucking ever.
Yeah.
But you can use this not just in a, like, oh, what the fuck happens? You can use it for more specific rituals.
Yeah.
And so, like, you can have a, like, oh, well, what the fuck okay, I need to do this for this. What do I need to do in order to do so? And then you just, like, pull out whatever decks and just whip that shit out. This is what I need to do. Moving on.
You could put it into a database and make a ritual generator.
Yes, I know.
I'm not even kidding. That would be amazing. That would be so fucking cool. Okay. Fuck, dude. Like that is so fucking inspired. Like, that's fucking dope as fuck. I'm not even kidding.
No, that's fucking amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
That's so fucking cool. I kind of want to ape that style and do something like that. But, like,
I mean, you're a chaos magician. Half of what we've done stolen anyway.
Fair enough.
Like, realistically, what I'm saying is I volunteer myself as a beta tester when you get this figured out.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do this.
Yeah, that is absolutely cool as shit. Like, fuck, that's dope. Like, it's amazing. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to this episode's quests and figure out what we're gonna do this time around. And Yara, I'm gonna throw it to you to throw one of these out here first.
All right, so I can send you some of the details, but it comes from the book Backwoods Witchcraft, and there's the creation of something that's called a Samuel. And what a Samuel is basically like a really fucking involved pendulum, right? So instead of just, like most pendulums, what they are is it's just like a rock attached to a string. But with a Samuel, it's like a piece of cloth that has all of these fucking weird things in it. Like, 2 nails and, 5 grains of salt plus, the hair of my firstborn child or what the fuck ever. And then you say a prayer over it and tie that shit up, and then you use that as a pendulum and the reason it's called a Samuel is because biblically, Samuel never lied. This thing will always tell you the truth. And I want you to create your own Samuel. Figure out what components it needs and what you need to say over it. Like, whatever text that you need to say, whatever prayer you need to say. Figure out what ritual you need to do to create your own Samuel, your own pendulum that will never lie to you, and give some results.
Okay.
Awesome.
Arts and crafts time.
Yeah!
Hell yeah! Hell yeah!
Make it out of some, pieces of fucking scrap cloth and some pipe cleaners. Throw some glitter on it and some finger paint and go nuts.
Yeah, it'll be great. And then just read some Isaac Asimov over it, or I don't know, whatever it is you're into. It'll be fine. So for my quest, what I'm going to do is folk magic adjacent, kind of. One big thing that shows up a lot in various forms of folk magic is the idea of a sachet or a mojo bag or a hand, right? And what this is a bag that is created the same way you would create a talisman. But what you do is you take this bag, you put components into it that represent whatever it is you want. Like, so you'd make like a wealth drawing sachet or a protection sachet or a blinding sachet that would make it so like you are blinded, like the law, like cops don't see what you're doing or whatever the fuck, right? What I want you to do is to create your own sachet. It can be for whatever purpose you deem fit, and to like create and charge a sachet and carry it around with you and record the results of how effective carrying basically a handmade, homemade talisman from just household goods, how effective that is.
Okay. Yay, more arts and crafts.
Yeah!
Hell yeah!
Totally up my alley.
Yeah, that's a lot of what this is. Hello, Mr. Catman. Catman is angry about stuff right now. He's going wild. He is so mad.
My cat was loud earlier too. I actually muted the mic, having to shoo him out of the room.
Mine are just being fat somewhere, so I don't even know. They're just hanging out being fat.
They're just that's what cats do mostly. So I think we have the divination left to do for these challenges.
Yep.
We should probably do that. We're professionals.
Yeah, so we're doing this episode, we're doing micromancy, which is just divination based on very small objects.
Yeah!
So you want to go first, Dreadnought?
Yes, because I have a very small object that I can use. That's right here. And what it is, it's a little Lego guy. And he's sitting here with his glasses on. And he's sitting here and he's just kind of fucking hanging out. And he's got a Lego guy head. And his legs are extra flexible compared to the Lego guys that I'm used to from when I was a child. I didn't want to say when I was small, because I was never really small. I was large even as a child.
Girthy toddler.
Yes. But from what I see from this, given how extra flexible things are, and extra kind of bendy and movie, and it's a Lego guy, it's something that everybody kind of remembers, right? Especially in our age demographic. But it's a little bit different than the Lego dudes that we would be used to from when we were kids. Like, this guy's leg he can have kicky legs. It's really weird. He can have multi-dimensional kicky legs, right?
I don't like it.
So from what I get from that is that, like, it's going to be something that is very much in a realm that you are familiar with, but is something, like, it will feel very familiar, but it will be like a new twist on something. It'll give you a new insight or a new perspective to look at whatever it is you're doing. Where you'll look at either when you're done with it or during the creation of either of these two talismans, you're going to look at it and be like, huh, I never really thought about it that way before. You know, like you're either going to look at the idea of a sachet, and when you're done with it and be like, well, you're going to discover something new, but it's not going to feel new, I guess is the way to put it.
So, I'll go next, and to preface this, before we started recording, I was trying to find some things that I needed to do, I guess. And in the process of me trying to assemble my life and abjectly failing, I had knocked over my paper shredder. And
good job.
Yeah. So in the room that I am in, that also contains my paper shredder, I have a lot of fucking confetti all over my floor right now because I didn't bother to clean it up before recording. So,
well, why not? Why would you? That's dumb.
So there's my little micro object. So a bunch of fucking paper in my goddamn floor that I'm gonna have to clean up later. I'm still kind of pissed about. So what I'm gonna do is, since it's already in a pattern, I'm going to not only mess it up, jumble it up a bit, but also make my job cleaning it up a lot harder.
Good job. I believe in you.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna bend over and shuffle up this goddamn mess and hate myself later for doing it. So, here we go.
Well, that's magic, buddy. I'm leaving all of this audio in.
Good. Ooh, this is interesting. So I just kind of shuffled it up, and I can post I can snap a picture of this before I send it to you.
Please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I'll snap a picture of this fucking paper, and I see this outline. There's like a circle, and within it there's a cross. And so what I'm getting from this is you're very much going to latch on to the fact of the inherent aspects within Appalachian folk magic and the Christianity that you were raised with. You're going to link into that. Very much so. Whether or not that's a good thing, who the fuck knows? But yeah, I'm that's what I'm getting out of it. It's God damn it, I hate that I did that. It's not even like, that fucking short modern carpet either. This is like that semi fucking shag carpet. This is gonna be
we could always just
bitch to clean up.
Just mow it. Just mow it, then it's not shag carpet anymore.
Fucking
Done.
buy a goat.
Just get a lawnmower.
They eat
easy.
Carpet, right?
Yeah, sure. Fuck it.
Yeah. Fuck. God damn it. All right.
All right, Cologne, you're up. What do you got?
So I grabbed this just before you could not started with yours.
Is that a tiny loofah?
No, it's sometimes referred to as a.
Yeah, it looks like a tiny loofah.
Yeah, it's a pom pom. It's a homemade pom pom.
It's a homemade pom pom.
That's adorable.
In my family, though, growing up, we used to call them tribbles.
Ah,
because my family's a bunch of nerds.
Nerd.
And so I kind of tying into your guys's because going back and thinking about family ties and family, the Appalachian especially being something that's passed down, that maybe doing this work will make me explore more, my family's influence on this. And also, I think I'll probably enjoy it, have fun with it, because this brings up good memories. Little homemade pom-pom, aka Dribble. I'll probably do something nerdy.
Yeah, of course you will.
I'm a nerd.
Honestly, if you don't, you will have failed me.
We named this fucking, right before this fucking quest. Yeah, you're gonna do something nerdy with it. We're all fucking nerds.
Well, shit, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I want to give a special thank you to our guest on this episode.
Just, you can find her on YouTube at the Inner Beauty Guru.
The Inner Beauty Guru on YouTube. Very fucking dope-ass channel. Check that shit out. I also want to give a special thanks to our sponsors and to our patrons. Once again, you guys are awesome. The patrons, the sponsors are pretty cool too, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. The only thing left for us to handle is a real quick hail scafuckle.
Hail scafuckle.
Hail scafuckle.
And aside from that, we're going to get out of here. We will see you soon. Until then, we're out of here. We love you all very much. Peace.
Peace.
See ya.
This has been a production of the Faith Blind Council. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/faithblindcouncil. We would also like to thank our sponsors. You can support us by supporting them. You can also contact us on Twitter at FBC Podcast, the number 1, on Instagram at FBC Podcast, and via email at faithblindpod@gmail.com.